Crash Bandicoot is known throughout the land for his bravery, stubbornness, and sheer silliness. But before he was the legend we know of today, a mad scientist born in Illinois had kidnapped him in the hopes that he would become his most dangerous general of his new world-dominating army. This was Dr. Neo Cortex. Welcome to the 11th episode of Drunk Powerscaling, the show where I hungoverly powerscale my favourite characters.
That was pathetic.
You may recognise Cortex immediately based off the giant N on his forehead, which stands for Neo, right? Which in actuality stands for nerd, which he got tattooed onto him from his peers at the age of 3. Naturally, this made him a little upset, so he blew up his circus performing family, as you do. So suffice to say, Cortex has quite the bag of tricks up his sleeve, such as his iconic plasma shooting ray gun, which isn't just limited to plasma. It has a tractor beam, can stun foes, can transform stuff into platforms, an unknown love mode, probably something not appropriate for YouTube, an unknown incineration mode, an unknown disintegration mode, although we can guess what those two do, can shoot lightning, and for defense he can use force fields. He has a resistance to extreme low temperatures, he has a modified handheld version of the ray that created Crash to begin with, he can fly using the hover scooter, jetpack, or leg rockets, he can teleport, and with his rift generator, can teleport to alternate universes. He possesses bottled mutagen, which gives him an unknown power boost, granting him new attacks like bullet hell. If you want to get really wacky, he has a multitude of racing game carts. Now, he does have some other abilities in Skylanders, but I'm not going to cover Skylanders or Spyro here. Now, we know Crash 1 to 4 are fully canon, with games like Twin Insanity and Crash of the Titans presumably taking place within the same timeline, but they're also implied to take place in alternate dimensions, which means when talking about these characters it's always best to composite. But games like Spyro and Skylanders are where the issues lie, since their canon is very dubious. So for the sake of this video, I won't be including them unless it's a feat that consistent enough to feats from the main games. Let's move on. Now, seeing as how iconic gaming bad guys with huge armies are currently relevant in versus circles, I think we should go over Cortex's minions too, since let's be real, in a versus debate you probably aren't going to use Cortex without his army. Now, I won't be going over every single ability, just what extra firepower they grant Cortex that he doesn't already have. First of all, there's characters like Tiny Tiger, Ripperoo, Koala Kong, Pinstripe Potoroo, Komodo Brothers, and countless variants of the lab assistant that don't really add much, but just are there to rack up the numbers a bit. In terms of what extra firepower Cortex gains, there's Uka Uka, granting Cortex invulnerability, energy blasts, lasers, and the ability to open quantum rifts. There's Engine, who provides Cortex with a bunch of extra mechs capable of hypnotizing entire armies, the most powerful being the Doominator, capable of destroying Wumpa Island. There's Embryo, who can create blobs to fight for him. There's Entrance, who possesses hypnosis. There's Dingodile, who can shoot fire, water, ice, and create electric fields. There's his niece, or daughter, we don't really know, Nina, who can transform animals into titans and other organisms into babies, as well as possessing her own mech. There's Nefarious Trippy, who can manipulate time and look into the future. He once freed the elementals, and these 4 masks control earth, water, fire, and air. He also commands the Titans, powered by a substance called Mojo. A lot of their abilities don't add much that we haven't seen already, but there are a couple unique abilities like Sludge's shapeshifting, Stench's stink bombs, Battler's cyclones, Anubis Vicious's ability to create statues and clones, and Psycho Mandrake's telekinesis. That's quite the army, one he keeps upgrading again and again to take down Crash & Co. But as much as he has the numbers, does he really have the power to take on Crash? Let's find out.
Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and... Fish?
Starting off with attack potency, you can casually lift Nina over his head, and bear in mind she has lots of metal on her. He belly flopped this worm. Now this may sound odd at first, but he should absolutely scale to Crash, even without his army. He's always taking full power blows from him, and is fought on par with him in several games. I mention this as Crash can run around the Earth, a city-level feat. Also remember, Cortex possesses the elementals in his army, who can create volcanic eruptions, storms, tidal waves, floods, earthquakes, and even created the in-universe Ice Age, and to neutralize that much heat would put the elementals well within the island levels of power. Hell, if you need more proof, Cortex himself stated that when powered up, Crunch Bandicoot could destroy cities and mountains. It's not quite an island level feat, but it still shows how busted the elementals are. Hell, the Doominator can destroy one per island at its maximum potential, and the elementals upscale from this. Wawa, the Water Mask, can flood the entire planet. And if you need more proof, the elementals can create earthquakes that are felt all the way to the Wumpa Islands. It is also important to note that a single power crystal can power Cortex's planet-level shrink ray. Now, giving Cortex the shrink ray as part of his arsenal is a bit iffy, but bear in mind that 5 of these crystals can match the elemental masks, which the main Crash cast can scale to, possibly putting them at planet level by default. There are also multiple statements putting the power crystals at planet level. Hell, Uka Uka is implied to be able to move the sun and moon since he can casually change the game from day to night. Uka Uka also scales to Aku Aku, who absorbed the power of the crystals capable of absorbing the power of stars. This one's a bit iffy, but Crash scales to the quantum masks from Crash 4, since the main cast can hurt other characters amplify these masks in Crash Team Rumble, and Crash has defeated foes whose machines were powered by them. This is noteworthy as Ika Ika can turn the Earth upside down, and Kapuniwa is the incarnation of time itself, similar to Dialga from Pokemon or Chronica from Mortal Kombat, so scaling to her will put Cortex at Uni+. If we give Cortex's army, Entropy has complete control over time and space. Now, the 4 quantum masks can seal a multiversal rift that could end all of existence. So if you do buy scaling to them, this means the main Crash cast is within the multi-plus ranges of attack potency, since we know the Crash cosmology consists of an infinite multiverse. As a more natural argument for high-end scaling, in Crash on the Run, Crash and Cortex can collect power gems, which are different crystals. Cortex, after collecting just a single one, states that he can construct an entirely new dimension with just a few more. Now, obviously a few is always a bit of an iffy term. He then states he'll destroy the rest of the multiverse with more. Of course, this can be seen as a multi-plus feat, but given Cortex would have to gather them all to begin with, I don't buy it. So yeah, scaling for Cortex is a headache. At minimum, he's island level, but very likely within the planet to star range. There's also the entropy and power gem universal scaling, which, whilst both aren't horrible, I can see why one wouldn't buy them. And the quantum mask scaling is very iffy, and I'm fully willing to be proven wrong. So at a high end, he's within the multi-plus ranges. Of course, given the racing games, Cortex has to have some love for speed, which definitely shows in his feats.
Crash Bandicoot! It's about time! This is going to be just like the old days, except this time, everything will go according to my plan!
He can dodge his own ray gun's blast and Uka Uka's blasts. He outran a bear and he's outrun hostile bugs. He's reacted to toxic gas. He can dodge lightning. He can even outrun Crash's evil counterpart, which implies again he does scale to Crash in speed. And Crash can react to a laser that reached a space station in seconds. And Crash can outrace and react to Oxide, who once flew from his spaceship to Earth in seconds. As mentioned earlier, Crash can circle the Earth several times, and Crash can also react to lasers moving beyond light speed, and Cortex can do this too. Not to mention, Cortex's mechs can keep up with Crash's, such as the motorcycle that passed by stars and the moon within seconds. Remember, these are basically cartoon characters. For more proof, Coco, in 48 seconds, piloted a ship from Earth to Jupiter, and just as a reminder, I do combine travel and reaction timing in this section. This one's also iffy, but Oxide, from his distant galaxy, can travel from there to Earth. The feat has no time frame and no indication of how distant Oxide's galaxy is to Earth, hence why it's so iffy. But even assuming it took an hour and the galaxy was close to the Milky Way, it's well within the massively faster than light range. The 4 quantum masks are capable of sealing a multiversal rift, which requires massively faster than light speed. And of course, if you buy the Capuna Powerscaling, then this means Cortex can keep up with immeasurable speed. So in summary, at minimum we can place Cortex in the faster than light plus tier, mainly via cocoa scaling. It's very possible he scales the Oxide's enhanced feat too, but given the context of the feat, it's pretty hard to justify. Then there's the infinite speed argument, which is already fairly iffy. Let me know what you think. Now, given some of the feats we've talked about, you have to be pretty durable. Thankfully, Cortex is, and then some.
Do you have any idea how stubborn I used to be? Yes.
He survived a cage falling on his head, his ray gun's bolts, being frozen in the Antarctic, survived the fall from his airship, retained his motor skills when his brain was removed, and survived putting it back in with no issue. He survived the destruction of his castle. He casually takes hit from Crunch and Crash all the time, which is noteworthy since Crash survived this explosion. Additionally, Ripper Rook survived an explosion with thousands of TNT boxes. Plus, Crash survived atmospheric re-entry whilst in one of Cortex's ships, as well as circled the Earth. You could also make the argument that since Crash can, Cortex should be able to survive a full power attack from the elementals, which again can reach the mountain and even island level of power. Additionally, the elementals can also create earthquakes that are felt all the way to the Wumpa Islands, and can potentially scale to planet level attacks as mentioned earlier, and since the Crash characters are basically cartoons, they can take full power blows from them. Also with Uka Uka, he can potentially absorb the power of stars. As mentioned earlier, the arguments for Uniplus and Multiplus feats are very iffy, so I'm not gonna bother for durability. Overall, we can place his durability at minimum island level via the elementals, and with Uka Uka possibly star level. And wow, Crash scaling is fairly nutty. There's a lot of head scratching feats here that I know is going to confuse some people, and that's okay. Depending on how well this does, I may cover Crash himself as well, although spoiler alert, it'd just be a retread of this video. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed. Stay safe, and as always, be excellent to each other.
He will lead my Cortex commandos to world domination. This time, I shall reign triumphant.